You guys probably think I'm a raging alcoholic. Well, most regular viewers of the channel will probably know that's the case anyway, but this really just drives the point home. Hello! Welcome to Brain Spill, the laziest show on the internet. My name is Tank, and yes, today is a video where I have an excuse to have a beer. So, talking about alcohol, I had the perfect choice to crack open a cold one and get talking. Like many people in ages gone by, nothing tastes better than the sweet taste of victory when you are the winner of a well-placed bet, especially when the prize is someone buying you a pint of beer. Too bad I had to buy my beer myself, but at the very least, I've got one. Bets can take many forms, and you wouldn't be too hard pressed to find somebody who'll take a bet over pretty much anything. You could, I don't know, bet depending on how many clouds are in the sky tomorrow, or in this particular case, if you could survive if you flew through a hurricane. Although it's one thing to make a bet, it's another thing to actually go through with the bet and come out on the other side in one piece. I can imagine that you're in the bar and your buddy comes up to you and offers you a bet, and I imagine most bets are probably something like chatting up the barmaid or trying to win a game of snooker or pool or something. But he asks you to fly into a hurricane. Now, most people would probably say, are you out of your goddamn mind? However, if you really want to prove a point and show that you are not afraid of anything, and even for a bet like this, you are going to put yourself on the line, then that beer is going to be well deserved at the end. Honestly, to fly through a hurricane, you must have some pretty big balls on you, and that's just the case of the person we're going to be talking about today. So why did someone decide to do this? Well, it all started in a bar, as many great stories do, with two Army Air Corps pilots who laid down the challenge of flying headfirst into an oncoming hurricane in Texas. Most people might make these silly bets and try and egg people on to do something that perhaps is quite dangerous, but very few would actually follow through and do the bet itself. However, after a few pints, people might get a bit of Dutch courage and build themselves up to actually go ahead and actually do this damn bet. Lieutenant Colonel Joe Duckworth finished his pint and got to work. On the 27th of July 1943, he boarded his propeller-driven single-engine AT-6 Texan trainer and took off into the eye of the storm. I mean, look at this thing. It's a single-engined propeller plane. If you were going to fly anything into a hurricane, this is probably the last thing you want to use. And I mean, if you want to give yourself the best chance possible, this probably isn't your first bet. For some people, this sounds absolutely absurd and outright dangerous. However, you do have to know that the pilot who is doing this is incredibly experienced, and he is fully aware of all the onboard instruments he has in his plane. In fact, he knows it like the back of his hand. As limited as this was back in the 1940s, this experience would prove pivotal and be great experience for him to train students in the future how to use their onboard equipment when flying these planes. So yeah, spoiler alert, he actually made it somehow. So yeah, this massive big bold player actually went through with it. He took his plane up, flew through the hurricane without a scratch, and landed back down like nothing had happened. He'd won his bet, and I imagine he'd got himself a nice crisp cold pint as a result. He didn't even do it just once, however. He did it once himself, and then he did it a second time just to prove it could be done with a weather officer. So he decided, you know what, I'm just going to do it a second time. First time wasn't hard at all. Although this all started as a bet, the implications of doing this are much wider, as this was the first recorded attempts at obtaining data from tropical cyclones and being able to pilot using their coordinates. As a matter of fact, the whole side of aerial navigation and technology stemmed from this event, and after realizing that it was possible to fly through a hurricane, people have done it more and more often, and people flying into and around incoming hurricanes actually help scientists learn about these freaks of nature. I suppose it's like anything we know today, there always had to be one person that was ballsy enough to go ahead and do it themselves first. Almost like somebody who would have, I don't know, tried to eat something from nature for the first time. Someone has to try it to make sure that you don't drop over dead, but when someone did it and they didn't die, then they would use it as part of their staple diet. And the same counts for flying into massive hurricanes. You know, just on a bit of a larger scale. Honestly, the pay must have been pretty good for somebody to actually go ahead and do this, and if it was me, I'd be wanting to get a bit of a pay rise after flying headfirst into a hurricane without fully knowing what was going to happen. The first big success that hurricane flyers had was in something called the Great Atlantic Hurricane, which happened in 1944. This hurricane was huge and it killed upwards of 50 people. But this could have been far more disastrous if they did not have the people in the air tracking this hurricane and being able to provide vital information to pre-warn areas that were due to be hit by the hurricane. Navy and Air Force pilots tracked the storm from the north of Puerto Rico and onto Long Island and New England before traversing down past North Carolina. This is just a prime example of how much you could achieve just by simply keeping tabs on a hurricane. If you know where it's going to go, you can take the necessary precautions to make sure that many people are saved from a terrible fate. What's really interesting about this is as the years have gone on and people have done this more and more, they've gathered so much information that they are quite sophisticated in the ways that they can now track hurricanes, thanks to the brave men and women that sacrificed themselves to fly up into these hurricanes. Which is crazy when people can pretty much predict a hurricane before it even happens. This is like some science fiction stuff. Although it is worth noting that the need for people to actually fly around or into a hurricane is probably not needed as much in today's times because we have such advanced technology that is able to track these things. People don't have to risk their lives to fly into the hurricane just to be able to tell people where it's going. So that got me wondering, why did so many people carry on doing this after Duckworth's first flight into a hurricane? Surely if it's that dangerous, why would people keep doing it? Well, aside from the fact that it's incredibly useful for plotting the routes and information for the hurricanes, apparently it's not actually as dangerous as you might think. Now, I've never flown into a hurricane, so I can't say for sure, but according to the powers that be and what the internet tells me, it's not the disaster movie that you'd expect, provided that you know what you're doing. Only 3 planes have ever been lost in the Pacific from hurricane activity and people flying into them. So, if you think about the amount of reconnaissance flights that have happened, and we've only lost 3 planes, in the grand scheme of things, the risk doesn't seem that high. So, of course, the risk isn't absolutely monumental. However, there is some risk involved, and that again must be pretty ballsy to go ahead and do that. And the excerpt for somebody that has done it said the following: "It's a once-in-a-lifetime experience. We fly aboard NOAAWP 3D 4-engine turboprop research planes. Flying into a hurricane can be turbulent at times. You feel like you're on a roller coaster for 10 hours. I've flown in a variety of storms, from tropical storms that have wind speeds in the range of 34 to 63 knots, 39 to 73 miles per hour, to powerful Category 5 hurricanes with wind speeds that exceed 136 knots. That's 156 miles per hour. A lot of people have the misconception that we fly above the storms, but we actually fly into the thick of it, about 10,000 to 12,000 feet above sea level. I do like roller coasters, I really do. However, everything that's involved with flying into a hurricane doesn't really sound like my cup of tea, so for this one, I think I'll give it a pass. And even if it's for a bet, even if someone's going to buy me a drink, I'd rather just get my own. That's probably the safest thing to do. If you like the video, be sure to like and subscribe. If you want to be notified as soon as I upload my next video, be sure to hit the bell button. And if you've got any ideas for what topics you'd like me to discuss next, let me know down in the comments below. As always, sources used in the video will be in the description. Right, I'm gonna go put my head in front of a desk fan and pretend I'm about to fly into a hurricane. That's probably the closest experience I'll ever have to that happening. So, I guess I'll see you guys in the next video. Fantastic.